You ever hear the term emotional letdown? I do too. I've used that term. Oregon is ready to not have one of those.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. Today's episode brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com to get 150 in bonus bets because you can get a big return over on FanDuel if you're a new customer. Win your first $5 bet, get 150 in bonus bets. FanDuel.com, that's the place to go. I'll lay out my keys to the game, of which everydayers might have an idea, but the specific keys to the game and how does Oregon manage getting ready for the Big Ten championship and a run towards the national championship while managing the offseason? It's an interesting question. I'm going to try to answer that coming up on today's show, but I want to start with this factor. So I got a question from one of you out there, Bud, who's a Locked On Ducks insider, asked about the emotional letdown factor. Now, this is a term that you hear every season in college football. You know why? It's very real. It's very real. Whether or not a team on the inside, from the locker room to the coaching staff, the players, anywhere in there, they wouldn't acknowledge it. Most of the time, you're not going to hear them say, yeah, well, we just did this, that, and the other thing, and we just had an emotional letdown after last week. But you see it in college football all the time. Oregon is not in a position to suffer that against Penn State. If they lose tomorrow to the Nittany Lions, it's not going to be because Dan Lanning's team wasn't ready to go. This is a guy who is on fire as a head coach and has been absolutely masterful getting his team ready to play. Think about this. Oregon 12-0 to begin this season. Which game did you feel like Oregon wasn't prepared for in the first quarter? Weren't ready to go, weren't dialed in mentally? I'd say Maryland. Maryland is up there. Idaho is probably up there. I don't even know if Boise State is up there. Oregon just had a couple fluky plays that allowed the Broncos to make that game closer than it needed to be, where, the mistimed snap and the fumble from Patrick Herbert, those things, not super worried about those things, and it was a very long time ago. So the emotional letdown happens after you play a game in which it means even more than just one win to a particular team. You probably have a field storm. It could be a top 25 upset. Oregon, for instance, was primed for an emotional letdown after Ohio State. That game, I think, was the peak of Oregon's emotional expenditure as a team this season. That was kind of the highest point. It wasn't beating Washington, though it was for many fans, but that Washington team is 6-6. Oregon won the game by 28 points. That Ohio State game, it was taxing physically, it was taxing emotionally, and Oregon came out on top. And the next week, they were just fine. Absolutely, positively fine. Went to Purdue, 35-0, boom, easy money. So this game against Washington, on paper, can absolutely have that. The emotional letdown factor. You played a rivalry game. But here are two reasons why I don't think that happens here. Reason number one, it was a 28-point win. Yeah, that requires physical exertion, but Oregon's not mentally drained after that game. Oregon didn't have the high of all highs. It's not the biggest moment of their season. It was a big moment because Dan Lanning needed to win that game and to reassure Oregon fans hey, guys, it's going to be okay. Wins against Washington are going to arrive. He needed to do that, but guess what? Got it done. Got it done comfortably and got the backups into the game into the fourth quarter. So that's the first reason. And then the second reason is that guy, Dan Lanning. Even if it had been a closer game than Oregon fans had wanted last week, do you think that they would have struggled to come out and be ready to play the next week? I don't think so. I think Oregon had a little bit of an emotional letdown factor last year, against Washington State after the 3-point loss up in Seattle. Because I think it can go both ways. You spend a lot, you come up short, it can be draining. You have to respond. And Oregon in the first part of that game, they didn't play super well. They were okay, moved it down the field, missed a field goal, didn't score, and then eventually they got it going and everything was fine. But Dan Lanning has proven, not just in Ducks versus them, remember, we see a lot on Ducks versus them, and it's great. It's awesome. We don't see everything. We see a lot of it, but we don't even see everything. And yet, from afar, it's easy to tell that Dan Lanning has got his finger right on the pulse of how to release whatever emotions he needs to for this football team. Are you not entertained? Jump around. Inglorious bastards. Like, everything about it. He's got it every week. And going into each game, I'm always curious coming out, what was the emotional tick? What was the motivating factor? How did he get his team into the right state of mind? So I think asking that after a regular rivalry game, incredibly fair. For example, 2018, speaking of Washington games, Oregon beats Washington in that overtime game. What happened the next week? They went up to Pullman, didn't score in the first half. Emotional letdown factor. I don't think Oregon's going to have that problem against Penn State in this game. Now, second thing I want to talk about to begin today's show before I get to my keys to the game is Evan Stewart. Evan Stewart had his worst game as an Oregon Duck. Failed to haul in a couple of passes that we have seen him bring in all season long. He had his first drop of the year early in that game. I remember watching that play. He's dragging across the field on 3rd and 6. Gabriel's got time to throw. He steps up. There's Stewart, and I'm going, oh, sweet, first down. Nope, not first down. Opposite of first down, 4th down. And Oregon has to punt. And still, the Ducks managed to put up 49 points. So he finished the game, I think, with 1 catch for 6 yards. And this question came in from Barry. Where was Evan Stewart, and what do we need to get him back involved? And question 2, what, if anything, can we do to slow down Tyler Warren? Well, I'm going to talk about the Penn State tight end, who I discussed on Wednesday's first show in the second segment. But as to the Evan Stewart question, I've mentioned this before the season. Evan Stewart has had some really big games where he's heavily involved, and then he will have games where he disappears. It's not because Evan Stewart isn't a good player. It's not because Evan Stewart is getting covered all the time and he's never open. A quarterback can't get through 5 progressions on every play. And that just happened to be a game against Washington where Trayshawn Holden was the go-to guy, where Tez Johnson caught a handful of passes. It's not as if Dylan Gabriel didn't look that direction. I don't think Stewart dropped the ball and then he said, well, I can't go back to that guy. Like, that was his first job of the year. He's as reliable of a receiver as Oregon has had. When you talk about making contested catches, open catches, it was an uncharacteristic game. I don't think there needs to be anything different, because this Oregon passing attack has always been at its best this season when they're spreading the ball around and you don't know where it's going. This could be an Evan Stewart game against Penn State, but they've got a couple of good corners. They've got a couple of really capable corners. One in particular, I forgot to pull up his name, so give me a moment there, has been excellent in coverage, but I don't want Penn State, and they can't, frankly, because Oregon's got their top 3 receivers healthy. A.J. Harris, that's the guy. He's got an 85 Pro Football Focus grade and 87 coverage grade so far this season. That's incredibly good. That would be the best number as a corner or safety, frankly, in coverage compared to any player on Oregon's team. Now, Ohio State also had some great corners, and they got beat by who? Evan Stewart and Tez Johnson, of course. But I don't want Oregon to be in a place where A.J. Harris is covering a guy, and that's the primary option where Dylan Gabriel is looking. If they want to travel A.J. Harris with Evan Stewart in this game, fine. Go for it. If Gabriel comes up to the line and says, we don't want to challenge that guy, we want to challenge everybody else, and that means you're left with Trayshawn Holden, Tez Johnson, and Terrence Ferguson with a little Kenyon Sadiq tossed in there, works for me. I think that's when Oregon and Dylan Gabriel have been at their best. There's no locking on. There's no got to get this guy the ball. It's just, hey, here's the coverage. Here's where they're moving after the snap compared to what they gave pre-snap. This is the route concept. This is where the ball needs to go. So I don't think anything needs to change. There's nothing wrong with Evan Stewart. Had a bad game. Happens. The best players in the history of Oregon have bad games. It happens. But to say that there needs to be a tweak in the game plan, no, I don't think so. I think Evan Stewart will be just fine. I won't be surprised if he has under 20 yards receiving in this game. I won't be surprised if he has 120 yards receiving in this game, because that's been the Oregon receiver room. Anybody on any day, the Oregon basketball mantra, sometimes you, sometimes me, always us. Let me know your thoughts in the YouTube comments or hit me up on X, formerly known as Twitter. 3 keys to win. Oregon's favored by 3.5. I think that's fair. Do they cover that number? That's coming up next. First, let's talk about Mint Mobile. I love a great deal as much as the next guy, but I'm not going to crawl through a hotbed of coals or run through a rainstorm in order to get there. But luckily, Mint Mobile's making it easy. Just to save a few bucks, it shouldn't be hard, and Mint Mobile makes it easy. No hoops, no BS. When Mint Mobile said it's easy to get wireless for $15 a month, they really mean it. Turns out it's easy to get wireless for $15 a month. The longest part of the process is going to be the time you spend on hold waiting to break up with your old provider. To get started, go to mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. Then you'll see right now that all 3-month plans are just $15 a month, including the unlimited plan. Remember that time when cell companies said, let's do away with unlimited plans? Mint Mobile's saying, no, we want you to have that because it is indeed the best. To get this new customer offer and your brand new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. That's mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on the first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. Go check them out today. All right, keys to victory and who needs to execute said keys. Number 1, discussed this on Wednesday. I'm sticking with it. Slow down Tyler Warren and force Drew Aller to throw the ball to the perimeter. I have not seen them do that consistently this season. I like Oregon's corners. We'll see if Jaleel Florence plays. He did not against Washington, but I think I'm in agreement with all of you in saying Nico Reed has played well this year. Dante Manning's having a solid season. And Jabbar Muhammad is, I think, near the top of the Big Ten in pass breakups this year. So you've got to trust those guys and say, look, if you're going to throw the ball, Drew Aller, it's not going to be to number 44. I don't know what that game plan looks like. I do know who would have to execute no matter how Tosh Lupoy, Dan Lanning, and company decide, hey, we want to slow down number 44 in the blue and white. Number 1 guy that pops into my mind, Tysheem Johnson. Tysheem Johnson, you could see Kobe Savage get matched up onto him as well. I think they've, interchanged Savage and Tysheem on the back end. You traditionally think, you got a free safety, strong safety. Both guys have played down in the box. Both guys have played over the top this season as well. And I think Oregon's, knock on wood, mostly done a good job of keeping explosive passing plays out of the repertoire for opposing offenses and made them work the middle of the field and take underneath routes. And that's a credit to the safeties, the defensive or the corners as well. But the safeties have not been a liability in coverage so far. But matching up with tight ends, you go back to the Ohio State game, you go back to the Michigan game, it's usually Tysheem Johnson and Kobe Savage. I'd put Brandon Johnson in here, but he's matching up with wideouts. And I think that's probably going to continue. So if you want to keep Tyler Warren, and keeping him in check, by the way, is anything under 5 receptions or fewer, 70 yards or fewer. If he's not accounting for, 100 or 150 yards of total offense, because, they'll snap it to him sometimes. He could have a passing play in this game. He'll run the ball in the red zone in particular. They do all sorts of things with him. If you're able to keep him under 70 yards receiving and not allow him to rack up, 8, 9, 10 receptions, I think that's doing a good job, because you're not going to hold him to 0 catches. If Oregon does that, that would be a remarkable defensive feat, and you'd essentially have to double him on every play. I don't think they're going to do that. But Tysheem Johnson, maybe Kobe Savage, and the linebackers will come into play as well. Again, depends on what kind of coverage you're calling on a particular play. Sometimes Bryce Betcher might get matched up with him, or Jeff Bossa might get. Bossa tends to play more around the line of scrimmage, spying quarterbacks, contain rushes, and those sorts of things. So probably not Bossa as much, but Betcher and Jackson, they could come into play here as well. But I think Tysheem Johnson and Kobe Savage are the guys that pop into my head first and foremost that make me think, yeah, they've got to play well if Oregon's going to hit on this particular key to the game. So that's key number 1. Key number 2, win the rushing battle. Does this key sound familiar playing a high-level Big Ten team? It should. In the Michigan game, Oregon outran the Wolverines, won by 21 points. In the Ohio State game, Oregon outran just barely the Buckeyes and won. In 2021 against the Buckeyes, Oregon outran Ohio State and won the football game. That has consistently been a deciding factor when these high-level, top-of-the-Big Ten teams play high-profile games. Whoever is able to run for more yards. Who do you think ran for more yards, Michigan and Ohio State last Saturday? Pretty darn sure it was Michigan. I'll double check, but I would be pretty surprised if it was not if it was not the good old, that's the story on the fines and whatnot. Let's see, team stats. Here we go. Wait for it. Up 173-77. Michigan wins the football game. We heard that a lot coming into the Big Ten. You got to match the physicality. You got to be able to run the ball. You got to be able to do that. Well, Oregon's been able to do that. That's a big reason why they are 12-0. And Penn State is in the same category, though certainly a notch below Ohio State in past years because they've lost 8 straight to the Buckeyes. They haven't beaten Michigan in a long time either. But one of the reasons is they haven't been exceptional in the trenches. I think Penn State is a good team on both sides of the lines of scrimmage. I'll talk more about that for my third key to the game as well. But you look at these games and the team that's able to run for more yards, this is a twofold thought. On the one hand, I want to see Oregon run the ball against a run defense that isn't 14th in the Big Ten, not in the country, in the Big Ten. That's what Washington was, and I was thrilled. Absolutely thrilled with how Oregon ran the ball last week. They do that again. They do that in any game. I don't think Oregon will ever lose a football game when they run for 200 yards. There are other teams that can. But with the way this Oregon defense is and what that means for the offense, I cannot see a world where Oregon loses a game running for 200 yards. They don't have to do that per se in this particular matchup, but they do have to play well defensively and contain Katron Allen and Nick Singleton. Those two guys are incredibly capable. They are explosive. They are physical. They will break tackles. They are really good. They are as good of a running back tandem as exists in college football. I think that Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins at Ohio State are number 1. These guys could be number 2. I'd have to think through everybody in the country that's healthy, because Texas had a couple good backs, but they both got hurt. Like, these guys are top 5. This is a top 5 running back tandem. You got to take them away. And that kind of goes back to the crux of key point number 1. Make Drew Aller throw the ball outside the numbers and down the field. Make him do it. And make him do it to somebody that isn't Tyler Warren. So, who comes into play for winning the rushing attack? I think this is about the interior of the lines of scrimmage. Derek Harmon, Jamari Caldwell, Amari Washington, Jordan Birch have a big game. Control the line of scrimmage. Don't force Oregon to bring an extra safety down into the box or blitz guys more in order to stop the run game or contain it. Got to be able to win the matchup up front. And then conversely, I think it's about the interior of the offensive line. Poncho and Marcus Harper and Kavika Rogers and Nishad Strother, whatever combinations out there at any given time, got to be able to get movement. Got to be able to run the football, create lanes for Jordan James and Noah Whittington to run through. So I think the interior offensive line, defensive line are the guys that will most determine whether Oregon wins the rushing attack in this game. But if they do, I think they absolutely win the game. If there were, that could honestly be key number 1, because I think if Oregon does that, they will win. If they don't stop Tyler Warren, they can still win. It might just be a little bit tougher. Key number 3, last but certainly not least, no more than 2 sacks. This Oregon offensive line is one of the final 3 for the Joe Moore Award. Absolute studs. Dylan Gabriel deserves some credit for that as well, because he's got to get him in the right protections. He's got to get the ball out of his hands. He's got to not take sacks, not run himself into sacks like Caleb Williams has been known to do from time to time, and he hasn't. He's done a really good job. He has looked like the veteran quarterback we were hoping Oregon got in the offseason. I think he's done a great job in this particular area. This matchup, certainly the interior of the offensive line, it matters. But this will come down to Josh Connerly and a Johnny Cornelius. Can those two guys replicate the performance that they had against Ohio State and Michigan? 0 sacks allowed. Of the 8 starting defensive linemen between the Buckeyes and the Wolverines, they could have as many as 6 first-rounders. They have at least 4. At least 4. And guess what? There's a top 10 pick on the other side of the line of scrimmage. Abdul Carter is going to be no later, I think, than number 7 coming off of the NFL draft board in the spring. Maybe he can go and be a part of the Broncos defense and support our guy Bo Nix. But Connerly and Cornelius, Jeff Schwartz tweeted out after that Ohio State game that those two guys, with their performance there, made themselves some money. They could do it again right here. And Connerly was phenomenal against Washington this past week. If Josh and Johnny step up big in this game and Oregon allows no more than 2 sacks, which frankly would be more than we've come to expect, but if it's limited, if you don't let that Penn State defensive line control the game and pressure Dylan Gabriel, I trust Oregon's receivers in the passing game to be effective enough against a talented Penn State secondary. But if you give the quarterback time, there's not a lot that corners can do consistently. So those are my keys, my prediction. Yeah, I'll give it to you right now. Why not? I've got Oregon winning 27-17. This is a good Penn State defense. I think the Oregon offense will be just fine. Settle for a couple field goals, perhaps. Maybe Abdul Carter gets a sack to prevent Oregon from getting a touchdown here or there. But I trust the Oregon defense in this spot. Penn State did not manage an offensive touchdown against Ohio State. I think they will here. I do. But I don't think they're going to hit 20 points. So I'll go Oregon 27, Penn State 17. Drop your score predictions in the comments below. Still more to get to. Oregon's navigating the offseason right now. How do they do that? What are they looking at? And a surprising transfer in addition to thoughts on Oregon hoops, as always, coming up next. First, a reminder, this episode brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. They're America's #1 sportsbook. Oregon's the #1 team in the country. FanDuel's the #1 sportsbook in America. That is a match that means that if you want to bet Oregon -3.5, FanDuel.com is the place to do it. And you can get ready to tackle NFL action as well. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you're placing your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. FanDuel.com, that's the place to go. You can get $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. FanDuel.com, never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So, the transfer portal is, I don't think technically open, but it's going to open soon. Players are announcing, you're going to see them going in the portal. Offers are being made, discussions are being had. They've been going on, frankly, for a very long time. We all know this to be true. It's tampering, quote unquote, but I mean, just at this point, it's just what it is. So I got a question from one of you out there about managing the offseason whilst preparing during the season. And my thoughts on this are twofold. Number one, this is why Dan Lanning has a big old staff. This is why he's got a big old salary pool for assistants, for staffers, recruiting people. There are so many people on Oregon's football staff that you don't know, that I don't know, that make a big, tangible impact on the program. That's the first reason. Second thought that I have on this. The college football calendar has been and continues to be completely illogical. Like a lot of things in this great sport that we love so much. It doesn't make any sense. It does not make any sense from an attention standpoint on the sport. It does not make any sense for the calendar of the kids' school years. It does not make any sense for coaching staffs. It doesn't make any sense. What I would like to see, because obviously staffs are capable of handling this. There are smaller staffs in the country that manage these things and are dealing with playoff pushes, but it's hard. It's definitely a challenging thing to do. What I would do if I were the commissioner of college football and, well, really the dictator of college football and could just make it whatever I saw fit, is I'd say, look, no early signing day in December. The season is the season. Focus on the games. Then you take signing day, you move it to February, which is where there is still another signing day. There will be names that Oregon goes after, guys that Oregon's signing, or this flip or that flip, or guys who haven't officially signed. That will still take place. But that should be the primary signing day and the only signing day. As for the transfer portal window, I'm on board, actually, with having 2 portal windows open, partially for my own reasons, because it makes for good content on the shows, but partially because I don't think it's unreasonable to say, okay, you can hit the portal, but it shouldn't be till after the season. Should not be during the season. Should be after the college football season ends. Like the week after the national championship game is played. That's when the transfer portal should open. Keep it open there. That'll be kind of at the end of January or so for a while until National Signing Day, because then once the season's over, you don't have games to prepare for. Then you can actually put all of your time, effort, resources effectively and efficiently into talent acquisition and building a roster. And then I am okay having another transfer portal window after the spring as well for guys who want to find a different home. I understand that presents a challenge. Coaches don't like that one as much. But I do think if you're going to have the transfer portal, it does make some sense for it to be there. So It's just something Oregon's got to be able to do. And the first notable transfer is not necessarily an impact guy, but could have been one day. Shaq McCroy has hit the transfer portal. Did not see this one coming. So he is the largest recruit Oregon's ever had, not rankings wise, physically. He is the biggest. He's 6'8", 365. He has immense size. I do not know why he's transferring. I do not know where he's going to transfer to. He's from the state of Alabama. I think Colorado was after him. They need offensive linemen all the time. Curious to see where he winds up. This is a guy who presents a unique physical skill set and does not look or move like other players, for better or worse. And certainly he was a project because of his size, but he is also a unique asset because of his size, and he's hitting the transfer portal, and I did not expect that. I mean, you don't see a lot of true freshmen, offensive or defensive linemen that play. Even on the defensive side of the ball, it tends to be the outside guys, right? Last year, Blake Purchase, Mateo Uyunglele, Tatum Tuioti all played as true freshmen. Edge guys. You need time in a college weight room. It is different. You are the biggest guy on the field in high school. You are the smallest guy on the field from a muscle standpoint when you get to college football, especially at the Big Ten level and SEC and any power conference. It is completely and utterly different. So there are just not that many true freshman linemen that can play offensively. There are not that many true freshman interior guys that can play defensively. You know, Poncho playing as much as he did last year, or Josh Connerly playing as much as he did in the jumbo package in 2022. Those guys are outliers, anomalies. Dan Lanning has spoken before about how the trenches are places that you need a year or two to build up and get your body into shape, to hit the weight room, get on the right eating plan, get your weight where it needs to be, and learn the offense, learn techniques, and get used to going against other Power 4 caliber guys. So, yeah, I was surprised. Obviously, I don't wish him any ill will. He clearly didn't see a path to playing time. I think it's a subtle reminder that though a lot of other guys get more attention, Oregon has quietly done a good job recruiting offensive linemen, and McCroy was certainly going to be a tackle. So there's someone or something about that offensive line room where he does not see playing time in 2025. I really don't think, haven't talked to the kid before, I don't think he could have expected to be playing in his true freshman season. Maybe he did, but I doubt it. I think he's looking at what is coming into this offensive line room, and he doesn't see playing time next year and feels like he could get it elsewhere. So that's the first notable name that is transferred out for the Ducks. This question came in, by the way, from In the Sticks with Knicks. Thoughts on Notre Dame being able to get the 5 seed? I don't think they're going to get the 5 seed. I do not. Talked about that with Zach Seiko, Locked On Nittany Lions yesterday. They could technically get it. They'll get a home playoff game, and the schedule that they play every year, I think, is worthy of being able to get to a home playoff game. I know they lost to NIU, but it's college football. This is just the world that we've created for ourselves. Didn't have to be this way, but it is certainly this way. But Notre Dame doesn't play a group of 5 schedule. They play a Power 4 schedule. They play a bunch of ACC teams. They play USC every year. They usually throw in a big game like a Texas A&M, or I think they play Florida State to begin next season. Florida State or Miami. Oh, yeah, it's Notre Dame and Miami next year. Like, I'm not off-put by Notre Dame's schedule and the idea that they could get a home playoff game. You go 11-1 with that schedule, yeah, I think you should. Now, the loss is to NIU, so if you want to say, hey, you shouldn't be able to do that, I'm not going to push back. I just know that the committee won't, so I'm not really going to spend too much time on it there. But I don't think they're going to be the 5 seed, which is the most advantageous non-bye position that you can have as a college football playoff team. As I've discussed before on the show, you get the Group of 5 and Big 12 champion in no particular order based on the current projections. That could change depending on how things shake out in conference championship weekend. But it'll be Penn State or Oregon. Whoever loses the Big Ten championship game should be the 5 seed. I think they'd give it to Texas before they give it to Notre Dame. And the NIU loss should be the reason why. Should absolutely be the reason why. I hope the committee does that. But ordinarily, Notre Dame 11-1, sure, put them as the 5 seed. That's fine. But when the loss is to NIU, no, you shouldn't get that particular benefit. Wanted to wrap with this. Oregon Hoops on Wednesday did the same thing. I mean, The same thing. They had 23 points in the first half. They scored 44 in the second. They somehow managed to beat USC by 7 points, 67-60. They go to 9-0. They are undefeated, still ranked inside the top 15. Did not play a great game. There were a number, and I mean a number, of questionable foul calls going either way. The free throws started to stabilize a bit from a balance standpoint in the second half. Jackson Shelstad had a career-high 24 points, 24, 25 points. He was great in the second half. He had 2 points in the first. Oregon just doesn't play a good first half of basketball, but they found the run. It started with defense. They hit a couple of threes. I've got plenty more thoughts on where this basketball team is at. I'll save them for Monday's episode when I'll do a full segment recap of whatever happens in the UCLA game on Sunday. Win or lose, Oregon will remain ranked and in just a really good position, building their at-large resume. But they're 1-0 in Big Ten conference play, and it always feels good to beat USC, no matter the sport, of course. But this was not a pretty game. Foul trouble, turnovers, missing open shots, sloppy play. But they found a way in the second half. Dana is just an adjustment king. He is Nick Aliotti right now. He is making every single adjustment that he needs to at halftime to completely dominate in the second half and win games. And you play a full 40 minutes for a reason. And Oregon plays a full 40 because they don't play the first 20. They play the second 20, and really it's the final 10 where they play their best ball. And Keyshawn Barthelemy continues to be the most important offensive player on the team. That is not even close. It is not Shelstad. It is not Biddle. It is not Tracy. It is not Bamba, who had a terrible game, and Oregon found a way to win anyway. Keyshawn Barthelemy is the most important offensive player on this Oregon team. But the important thing, especially in college basketball, we saw this with the football team as well against Wisconsin. Survive an event, just win. Just find a way to win. And you know what? At the end of the year, you're not going to look back and say, boy, Oregon doesn't have any experience in close games. No, they've already got a ton of it. And they're just finding ways to win. So good on Dana Altman. Good on the Ducks for finding a way to win an ugly game when the calls were going against them. That one felt pretty darn good. And UCLA is a big showdown at Matthew Knight Arena on Sunday. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.